Namaste and welcome to Satsang. And as Vidya said, welcome to anyone joining us for the first time today, and more than welcome. This morning, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and really to focus on an essential subject regarding our awakening, regarding our progress. But it is the most difficult thing for me to discuss, to try to put into words, to try to do justice to something that is beyond anything that I could ever describe. And so, and also to try to discuss it without bursting into tears is something challenging. So I'm going to give it a go, and we'll see where we get to. It became obvious as I was on my own journey to awakening that kind of may seem a strange thing to say, but that the self has moods. It has ways of showing itself to us, and sometimes it will reveal itself as a sense of clarity or a sense of wisdom or just some obvious knowing that's obvious in that moment that wasn't obvious the moment before. And then sometimes in my own pathway it would reveal itself as this absolute quietness, this sense of just being totally cocooned from any sensory experience. That was still going on inside. That was still going on in sense perception, and thoughts were still going on, but there would just be this opening where there was just this utter quietness where nothing could touch that. And at other times still it would present itself as this surging energy, this movement of energy, this sort of wanting to pervade my existence, something like that. It wanted to work its way through my existence. And what I want to try to talk about today is when it would present itself as love. And really all of these are the same thing. Sometimes we'll be more open to its presence, the presence of the self. And I say it, but I mean you. And I say it and I mean I, because it's not separate to what we are. Sometimes there were these moments where it would present itself as love, and they were extraordinarily transformative. And the truth is, the self is not an experience, but there are some experiences that can be amazingly transformative, that don't leave you in the place that they found you, these moments. And it's really that I'd like to dive into today. So I'm not really one for telling stories, but I'd like to tell this because it's a kind of a love story, falling back in love with love itself, and a few pivotal moments that I hope to share about that. And as you're listening, as you're just taking this in, just listening with an openness, you might begin to feel something as well. You might be open to this presence of love. So I'd reached a point in my own journey where I'd read just about every scripture and book, and everything I could ever get my hands on by any of the great teachers that have ever, modern and those teachers that have left their bodies. And at this particular time, I was obsessed with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I'd read his works, his Satsang, so many times. The I Am That book and all the other ones that his translators had written, and his latter teachings before he left his body that were, much more direct even. And I was really into truth in terms of wisdom. I really got the wisdom of it, the sense that I'm not a separate being. It was very, very clear, but it hadn't flowered somehow into this deeper experiential thing. And I thought I knew what Maharaj was. I thought I knew what the self was. And I remember watching one day, the Lost Satsang it's called, and you can find it on YouTube if you're interested, of Maharaj. And he was explaining to this particular person some aspect of his question, that this question had been asked. And Maharaj stopped at one point and said, and I might not have the exact words, so forgive me, but he said, do you want me to go any further? What do you think about this? Have you ever thought this way before? And it struck me in that moment that there was this utter love, which is not a particular way I'd thought of such a direct teacher. You know, he's well known for his wisdom, but he was stopping right there and saying, you know, love was saying, do you want me to go any further? Because this person was listening and was kind of a little bit freaked out and a little bit in awe and a little bit scared at the same time. And it just taught me in that moment that I don't really know what love is, what love would do. And I kind of got this sense in that moment then there was more to see about the self. There was more to understand about the self. A couple of weeks later, I was in my bedroom. I used to have all these pictures of all the great teachers, and I would, you know, sit with them because I didn't really have a teacher to sit with at the time. And I would sit with them and try to ask for help. And I suddenly was overcome with this urge to just stare into, I had a picture of Ramana Maharshi, and overcome with this urge to stare into his eyes. And of course, my mind's telling me I'm absolutely insane at this point, staring into the eyes of someone on a photograph. But I did it anyway, and I began to experience something. I began to really experience what he meant by silence, that it wasn't just an absence of sound, that it was a fullness of love. It was nothing in potential yet, and it could be anything, and nothing in actuality yet, everything in potential, and it could emerge as something. And that was the very essence of love. And this intense energy began to build up inside me and began to there's a pressure around my heart that began to happen, and I felt like at that moment that I was going to burst open to some degree. So I looked away very quickly and decided not to do that again because I didn't want to burst open. But it left me again in a different place. It left me in an openness, as there's something here still, with all everything that I've read and experienced, I haven't fully encompassed, I haven't fully understood and experienced what it is. And the closest word I can get is love. There's some expression of love that was trying to reveal itself to me. Even to say trying to reveal itself is too much, because it isn't even doing that, it just was there. And I read also a line from a book, Ram Dass's work about Be Love Now, where he describes when he met his teacher, and he sat in front of his teacher and he couldn't even look him in the eye because he felt so unworthy, so very different to this being that was just radiating this love. And he recognized in that moment that the teacher was just this essence of love. It wasn't a human being at all. And that it absolutely didn't matter to that teacher any of these perceived flaws and unworthiness. They were just accepted and loved, even especially with those. It just didn't matter. So there was this other kind of small opening then. And I can't remember how much longer after that, but there was this urge to sit next to the picture of, I had a picture of Christ with his arms open, you know, the traditional picture of Christ in this kind of embracing pose. And I just sat there and looked at this picture, and suddenly there was just this sense, this greater dimension of I won't even say my being at the time, because it didn't feel like my being. It felt very, very different. It felt very, very separate to me. And I felt like it was going to crush me. I felt like it was going to annihilate me. And there was, all it was this very gentle love, this very gentle sense of total healing presence of love. Again, I'm struggling to put words to this, and again, this sense came that it absolutely didn't matter what I thought about myself. It didn't matter about my flaws. It didn't matter about my unworthiness. It didn't matter about any of that to this presence. Not in a cold way, but just that it didn't see those flaws. It didn't see my unworthiness. It didn't see this part of me that was very definitely wanting to run away from this picture. And I remember this very bizarre moment of feeling absolutely loved, absolutely, in the most fullest meaning of that word, absolutely loved. And feeling rather embarrassed at the same time that I was sitting in front of this picture in this wooden frame, this picture that I printed off on my computer, and yet I was having this mystical experience. And also a little bit insane at the same time that I was doing that. And there was just this sense that nothing really mattered in that way, nothing at all about my journey or all my reasons why I would not be worthy of awakening were just not important or even relevant to this, whatever it was. And I felt like I was getting to know Christ a little bit better, what Christ actually is. That he's not a person in that way. He was also that, but there's something so much more profound. And yet each time I touched upon this love, it had to recede back into, it had to just be an experience, because this sense of my own unworthiness was held back onto it. Without realizing, I picked up this idea that I was me, and this love, this great presence of love, was something other that I had to get to. And that seemed impossible. It seemed like a mountain to climb. It seemed like I would never ever be able to achieve that. And yet each of these moments had left me slightly different, slightly more desperate to find this and be this, and slightly more willing, or a lot more willing in the end, to be willing to give up everything I thought was in the way of it, of living as that, as to be, that it was even possible for me to live as that presence. And this led to a long, long struggle inside of feeling worthy and feeling, trying to feel worthy of this presence and trying to feel ready for it, because every time I touched upon it, it seemed to this immensity of power and absolute love that was just something that I had a sense that no human being could really grasp in its fullness. If we fast forward a couple of years where there was just this absolute desperate searching for it, and also rejecting it every time I came near it out of a sense of fear and unworthiness, there was this utter developing feeling of, I cannot die in this body and not find this, not live this. I have to touch it again, and I have to somehow touch it so completely that it does something fundamental to the rest of my sense of being someone, to the rest of the me. And it was around about this couple of years later that I got the chance to go and sit with Adyashanti, as you might know, some of you might know. And in between that time, I just got to the end of my ability to live without that presence of love. You know, just to know truth as wisdom just wasn't enough anymore. It had to somehow flower. I just was absolutely willing at that point to give up whatever seemed to be in the way of that, because I saw afterwards there was nothing at all in the way of it, but I really was convinced that there was at the time. So I sat in this room with 300 people, and some of you watching this were with me, so you'll know And I remember talking to some people next to me, and they were talking about non-duality, and they were really into non-duality, and we really get it, you know, we get it. They were saying that there is no personal self, and there's nothing to realize, and there's nothing to understand, and there's no need to practice. And I remember just looking at them and knowing that they just hadn't touched this presence ever. They just were missing the fullness of it, that they hadn't felt this transformative reality, this wholeness, this absolute fullness that can kind of grasp our being when we're open to it. And of course, in that moment, there was this unworthiness that arose, because there I was about to sit with this awakened being, and I was judging the people next to me at the time as not being, well, not right next to me, but down the road, you know, down the row. There were all these non-duality groups, and it was almost fashionable to be into non-duality. So somehow I managed to just let that go, and I just sat there and I didn't know what to expect. And then something began to happen that I can't really put into words at all. I can't, but I'm trying to, I guess, trying to inspire you to experience it. Even before, and I have to say, it's nothing special about this particular teacher, Adyashanti. He just embodied it very, very well. And actually, ironically, the talk that he gave was entitled Redemptive Love, a love that's so perfect that it heals everything inside our sense of separateness. And it's absolutely just began to, I felt like something had just opened up in the top of my head. Whether you call it a crown chakra opening, who knows? I really didn't care in that moment. There was just like liquid silk or gold or this warm presence. There was a very physical thing being poured down inside my body, and it just, I sat there for almost an hour and a half, and it just began to fill up my entire being. And all I can say as to why it happened then is I just must have been ready to really give up my idea that I was not good enough, that this was other than me, that this presence of love was other than me, something I had to get to, or something I had to let go of something in myself to reach it. All those ideas have been experienced as a block or a boundary. And I began to cry like I'd never cried before. It was just this sense of everything was utterly, utterly okay. Nothing could ever be wrong in the universe, even though, of course, it seems very often like something was wrong. And I just remember wishing, this really bizarre thought went through my mind, that I wish I'd brought some tissues, and there's just tears rolling down. I didn't have any. And for a moment, there was a looking at Adyashanti on the stage, and I remember thinking, this being is doing something to me. And then this utter knowingness came that that's just not what's occurring. That this being was just holding a place, an openness, a reminder that there is something deeper that we can experience, that is ourself. So in an effort to avoid looking him in the eye, because I just couldn't take it anymore, I couldn't take this unworthiness that was arising inside, this sense of also this immense presence of love that was very, very redemptive, meaning the literal meaning of the word redemption is to make whole, to heal, to make complete, and it was absolutely what was occurring. So in an effort to avoid this crushing unworthiness that was coming up, I began to look at everyone else. I turned to look at everyone else around, and they were just kind of all sat, and a couple of them were yawning, and there was about 4 or 5 of us that were just absolutely sobbing like we just couldn't stop. I remember thinking, they're getting it too. And there was one guy on his phone, just kind of texting, and I just wanted to go up and grab him and shake him. It's like, you're missing it. You're absolutely missing this. But there was also a realization that just like I wasn't ready before. These other beings probably weren't. And it seemed incredible to me that somebody could sit in that room and not be absolutely transformed. And it wasn't anything about the human body that was on the stage. It wasn't anything about the room. It wasn't even anything about me. It was just, love was finished feeling limited, is the best perhaps description I could describe. And there was a sense that even if I touched this presence, even for just a nanosecond, that I could not come back out of that feeling unworthy at all, feeling any self-doubt at all, even feeling any sense that was anything other than love, that anything was made out of anything other than love, that there was anything other than that. And that this utter sense of how immensely powerful this presence was, and that my previous idea that it was going to crush me was just completely absurd. It was just kind of, it sounds biblical, I know, and it's why I hesitate to talk about it sometimes, but it just washed my entire soul clean in that moment. There were still thoughts afterwards about self-doubt and unworthiness, but they didn't have any sticking power. I didn't have any capacity to believe them at all. Although they still came for a while. And I hope as I'm describing this, I'm not trying to say that I've done anything that you can't. I'm trying to say that there was just this openness finally. That what took the time was this openness to really actually be finally willing to admit that there was really no difference between me and this guy on the stage. This being that I had revered and worshipped, as something utterly more than I could ever be. I had to finally let go of that insistence inside me. This immense love would not let me hold on to that. I was being asked in that moment to just, it wasn't even an asking, it was just washing everything away. And I knew that I'd have to make some significant effort afterwards to pick it all back up again if I wanted to. And I think we sat there for an hour and a quarter, and I really couldn't tell you a single word that was said that whole evening. And I think for about 5 or 6 hours afterwards, I was still crying. And there was just this struggling of this frail human body to begin to embrace this immensity of love. This frail human body, as in, how can something so finite and small ever be able to fully radiate this immense, infinite presence? And yet, somehow the body was willing to try, that there was some transformation going on in that. And it was absolutely amazing how much the body could handle of that. Every time this presence surged stronger, there was this sense that I couldn't take anymore, not in a painful way or in a bad way. It was just the back, this feeling again came that I was going to burst open, absolutely burst open. And in this sense, I didn't really care at that point if that happened or not. I was just like, whatever, if this is what is real, if this is what is waiting beyond the body, then fine. If that's what it takes, then fine. And I'd heard all these stories of, this love, this loving presence. And I'd read all these near-death experiences. People touched upon this awe-inspiring love, and to actually begin to experience it was just completely transformative. The reason for saying all of this is to try to get you to that end point now, to an openness to experience that love that will transform everything within you. You can spend a lifetime trying to be worthy of that love. Or you can realize that it just doesn't matter to that presence. It doesn't matter. Right where you are now, you are absolutely loved and accepted. No matter what you've done or not done, no matter what judgmental thoughts you've had about yourself or others, no matter what character flaws you have, no matter where you think you are in your awakening. At some point, we're all called to admit that we are already that presence of love, that which has no form and yet is absolutely full, infinitely full. Can you grasp even for a second, or an openness to experience what infinite really means in terms of infinite love? Have you really opened yourself up to that love? Have you really allowed your heart to burst open? What are the barriers to that love? And can we remove them? Can we be willing to set them aside? The barriers are this idea that you are not that already, because it feels different when we first touch upon it. It feels extraordinarily different to our normal waking state way of experiencing ourselves. My normal waking state way of experiencing myself at first is this separate being that's full of all this stuff and triggers, and absolutely feels and sounds and looks different to this loving presence these great beings have embodied. But if you're willing in a moment just to accept that none of that, the stuff that you think about yourself, and none of the reasons that you feel a need to protect yourself are absolutely true, that these barriers can come away from your heart, then there's the openness in that moment to experience something profound. And even if you touch upon it for just 10 seconds or a second at first, it's going to change you. It's going to leave you more whole. It's going to leave you less able to, or completely unable to, feel not good enough ever. It's going to leave you complete. It's going to leave no sense that no matter what, a sense that no matter whatever you experience for the rest of your human existence, you can never be any more perfect than you are already. That even in circumstances in your outer world and the circumstances of your inner world are not as you would like them to be, that it really doesn't make any difference to this loving presence that you really are. And the last barrier, which is really the sense that it is other, that we have to become it, that we have to be worthy and ready and all of that stuff. And perhaps if there is any barrier there, as there was for me, that it's this sense that it's too strong, that it's going to crush you, or it's going to overpower you, or you've read some scary teaching that, you know, enlightenment is annihilation of the self. Something like that. It's just not true. If it annihilates anything, it's only your ability to limit yourself, to perceive yourself in conditioned and limited ways, and to love yourself and others in conditioned and limited ways. And what took all that time for me was to be willing to let go of those barriers. The thoughts that I was holding on to with such intensity that it was holding back this immensity of love and this extraordinarily different human experience that we can have, that we can still be an average human being doing what average human beings do. You can be extraordinarily ordinary, that we can be an absolute embodiment of this presence of love, a walking, talking example of love, and still do all the things that we like to do as human beings, still have all the things that we want to keep about ourselves as human beings. And I hope that I am inspiring you to kind of open your heart more. You don't even have to know how to do that. Just the urge to have a deeper experience of what you actually are. And I'm calling it love here, but it could be any name at all. That there is something already about you that is absolutely perfect. that is unchanging and whole and complete. And it will absolutely, when allowed, wash through your separate sense of self and right literally physically through your body and give it a tune up and upgrade. And then through your life, your mind, your life, your relationships, your finances, your career, your purpose in life, everything, absolutely everything. And then onwards, it will want to continue onwards, outwards to how you see everybody else and everything else. It will want to transform everything, but it kind of needs your permission in a way. Not that you're separate to it, but it needs your openness. It needs your what is this opening of the crown chakra? It's my willingness, your willingness to admit that you might already be this. And what is it like if I am already this? Just a gentle, gentle softening that maybe no matter how much I read about this and practice and try to get to this, it's never ever going to touch it as much as my willingness to admit I must already be this. Just about every great scripture and teacher that has ever appeared on this planet has said that very same thing, that you are that already, that there isn't anything else. You don't need to turn into it. And you certainly don't need to be worthy of it. It's just impossible to ever feel worthy of this. But you can be this now. You can be this love now. And that's not a finish line. You can be this love as much as you can in this moment. Are you willing just for this time to set aside your self-doubts, your self-judgments, all the things that you're blaming yourself for, all the things that you're certain make you unenlightened as yet, all the things that you feel you have to sort out and resolve about yourself before you can experience this presence of love. And perhaps even more importantly, are you willing to admit that maybe we don't know what love is actually? I still don't know what love is. It is constantly revealing itself to me in an ever greater way. This mystery that is you, that nobody can see or feel, but it's absolutely a lived experiential reality. What would it be like to move about the rest of your existence without being able to doubt yourself? Without ever being able to become arrogant? Without ever being able to take anything personally, positively or negatively? Without ever being able to judge yourself or anyone ever again? Those thoughts may arise from time to time, but they just don't have any home inside your heart anymore. There's no impetus within you to hold yourself as a small being anymore. There's a willingness to experience everything that you are. What would that be like for you? To go throughout your day, going to work, spending time with your family, even doing your spiritual practice from a place of not needing anything at all from it, except a gentle wish to see this fullness in its ever increasing capacity. Paradoxical as it may sound, there is an ever greater ability for this finite human body and mind in all of us to experience the infinite. There's an infinite capacity to deepen in this experience. And it's absolutely possible to know with total conviction that you are that, to live as that, to embody it, to be an example, to radiate it to the world, just because it's so fully saturated your being. And at the same time have this sense of being held and cushioned by it, this playful sense of duality, that this gift has been given to me, that I have been swallowed up in this love, that I am cushioned and cocooned and being embraced by this. How is it possible for both of those to be our experience when we know clearly that we are it? How can we feel embraced by it? How can it be that sense of separation? But that's the wonderful thing about when this love appears as a human being. It has the capacity to experience it both ways, and we don't have to pick a way. So every time I begin to try to describe this and think about this, there is a momentary sense of duality that I could never do it justice, but also an utter sense that I am always being that completely. What if every day for the rest of your existence was a deeper opportunity to experience what love is? What if you could never get to the end of being able to love yourself more? And I'm not talking about, losing the weight you want to lose, or having the career you want to. All that is great, it's fine, but an absolute willingness and a never-ending deepening of your capacity to see your own perfection. And to have it transform you, to have it change you, to have it reorient your existence, your whole life. So that everything that you do then becomes in service to this love. Everyone that you look upon, you're willing to remember that they are this presence of love, even if they've seemed to have forgotten it. That nothing you could ever experience or encounter is other than this love, and that it has some very good ways of disguising itself as being less than loving. So even after all these words, I still don't feel like I've done it justice, but hopefully I might have inspired you to open your heart a little bit more, to be willing to embrace something even deeper, to let go of this idea of a finish line, that there is this absolute presence of love that is never going to be any more absolute than it is. But as human beings, we get to experience it in ever greater depths. And experientially, it can be ever more real, ever more profoundly obvious. And that the one thing it cannot do is destroy you. Absolutely. It is absolutely safe to embrace this immensity. It's infinite power. But with that power comes, the power and love are the same. They are absolutely the same. Love cannot destroy anything. It can only create and the appearance of and want to understand and embrace. So sometimes when I finish these satsangs, I always end up with this slight sense of disappointment that I'm trying to put something, to convey something that's infinite through some finite medium. But it's not really about the words, it's about eliciting an openness. And I really, really hope that it has done that. Or even just a willingness to look at why you're holding back this immensity. What is your current reason or excuse for holding back this immensity? What do you think needs fixing about you before you're ready for this? Because that immense presence of transformative love is not seeing that at all. That love doesn't see a human being with flaws, and it doesn't see something or someone that's unworthy. It doesn't even see anything that needs fixing about you. Although, ironically, when it's experienced, it does seem to fix everything about you. But it's not coming from that place. It's coming from the place where there never, ever was anything wrong with you, ever. that you never fell from grace, or you never incurred any karmic debt, or you never were anything less than whole. Okay. Maybe at some point in the future I'll try again to describe that, but hopefully there's an opening. If I've inspired you to look again, then that's successful. So if anyone would like to ask a question, it doesn't have to be about this particular thing I was talking about today, but anything to do with awakening or satsang in general, you're more than welcome to. And if you would like to, then click on participants at the bottom of your screen and scroll to the bottom of that and click on the raise hand icon. And it'll let me know that you want to. Okay, so we'll start with Rich.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm a bit upset at the minute. A friend of mine died, but it's a funny thing because as soon as I feel grief, I notice that I'm more open to all of this. I mean, I'm always open to it intellectually, but I'm more open to it emotionally. It's almost like my defenses are stripped back a little bit.
Grief has a way of doing that, doesn't it? It has
does for me, definitely.
An absoluteness about it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoke before that the times when I've had seeings, it's always been through pain. So yeah, that's the way it shows up for me. So that's
It's
how
the
it
same
is.
for me. As much as I'd like to say I learned from bliss, it just wasn't so,
Do you know, oddly enough, just as an aside, I feel better in a grief state than I do in a day-to-day state because it's real. If that makes sense. That pain's real.
It's
Rather than
authentic. It's authentic
it's
in that
authentic.
moment, isn't it? And you can't
Yeah.
avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever see me crying, I'm generally at my best. I don't know if I had a question. I just more to say thank you. Like when you talk about like what happened with you, I was thinking of a word inspiring before you said it. I see a physio, and the guy who's my physio, he's older than me. He's 52 and he can do the splits. He can do things you wouldn't believe, and so it's easy to believe in what he tells me. I can see it in him. He's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And with these things, because it's more unseen, and because I'm quite switched off in some ways, like emotionally, I need, I don't know if proof's the right word, but I need to hear that story. I need that something to go, yeah, you listen.
I think you've just muted yourself again there, Rich.
Call just came through.
There we go. You were saying,
but
sorry.
yeah, so yes, and when I hear your story, it's like that for me. I'm like, I know when people talk about their experience, like, well, not know, but I get a sense of whether they're being authentic or whether they're just kind of kidding themselves, and yeah, it feels very authentic to me. So yeah, so I just thank you, really.
I'm glad it's helped, and it's one of those things that I have the most impossible job ever to try to describe that, to hopefully to inspire and to be an example that we can all be that example as well is the message, and sounds like what you're picking up from it. So that makes me happy there.
Yeah. I can only, like I say, I mean, I can only talk about it from kind of things I've read, but I read in a book once about this master, and he asked, like, it's quite a famous one, he asked his 3 or 4 disciples the answer to some questions, and the last one just gave him silence as the answer. And I guess when you're trying to explain something with words, you can only do so much, can't you? You can lead a horse to water.
yeah, if you can do anything, it's really cultivating this sense of thinking about it, reading about it, learning about it isn't enough. There was just this immense sense in me that just never was going to fill this void or hole, HOLE, that was inside my being somewhere. Like my soul was
Um,
just empty and just was waiting to be filled up or something. And it sounds poetic, but it really was. It was extraordinarily painful, as I'm sure you're aware.
yeah, I do. I get where you're coming from. You know, I'm grateful for the things I have in life. I'm so blessed. I mean, God, I've just had twins, but you know what? They're amazing and I adore them. But they don't fill that hole. If twins can't do it, I don't think anything can really.
And it's
Nothing
okay to admit
outside of
that, isn't it? It's
yeah, it's
okay.
fine. It's fine. Yeah,
It's and it doesn't mean we love them any less. I
no,
had the
not at
same when
all.
I had my own family. There'd been this sense that would complete me, and it did for a while. But then this aching emptiness, not in a profound spiritual emptiness, just this
Yeah,
absence of any sense of fulfillment at all began to come back.
yeah. No, my brain at the moment, it's I guess it's part of a grief process, but it's telling me that I need that friend back to be complete.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but it does that. It does that. I've experienced that before, so I'm wise to that one. I know that, yeah, and yeah, I'll make the most out of it while I'm yeah in this state, and continue questioning as I've been doing, and I've stuck with my question.
very
Um,
good, very good.
you said the other day like that you can move to other questions if you feel right. So what I do is I kind of branch out, but then I come back to the original one because my question is one that part of the trickery of my mind is to
Yeah,
distract me. So I always
yeah.
come back. So
Especially for you, I would just be wary of that tendency to sabotage with
oh yeah.
substituting a less penetrating question. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for sharing. It's good to hear the feedback. Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, so Vidya.
Yeah, hi Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Um, yeah, everything that you were talking about, what's come up for me in the last day or so is this being authentic, and there's a sense of, without a doubt, that presence. I can feel that, but I can also, the last day or so, I felt this on and off this anger. It wasn't so much I am angry, it was almost, oh, look at that. There's a very subtle sense, and it feels like anger. And I noticed it was sort of getting stronger, and there's been a lot of questioning, and it was around to being my authentic self, and anything that's said from an apparent being is a immediate seeing that this is just a reflection and showing me that there's some self-rejection, which is why if I feel, awful, in that moment, but yet there's still that sense of peace underneath it that I can quickly recognize. But and then what came up before Satsang tonight was looking again, and I can't find a me, I can't find that sense of a someone, and yet there were these ideas that somebody, just that had obviously been held and believed for a long time, that um, somebody, a particular person is like this, and that's because of this past life, and you're like this, and it was all this, and I just thought, what is all this belief? Enough. And I feel really like there's the energy there that's really, it feels peaceful, and I can watch it, and then almost like this energy that's trying to escape, and I don't know how to explain that, but it's almost like I'm refusing to believe in this anymore, because it's like, how can it be? How do you know? How do I know that past life? How do you know that person was that? Why did I ever believe such things? How could that ever be true? And that sort of makes me feel angry, where I'm at the point where I really want to go deeply into this and see through it so clearly. So it's not trying to grab hold, because that's what it feels like. You know, even though there's a space and an emptiness, there's also these little.
It's kind of constantly trying to reassert itself, isn't it? This separate sense of self, until it's dissolved completely. It's kind of trying to sneak back in, you know, through some judgment or something that's happening inside. And at some point, right, I remember feeling quite angry, not at something, but just like, I just don't want to delude myself anymore. I can't. I want to know what reality is. I can't do it. I won't do it. And of course I did, you know, still pick it up every now and again, but there was this kind of fire or something that started inside. Like I have to move this away. It wasn't enough. At first, that separate sense of self is all we know, isn't it? And then we experience that peace, that silence, cushions, you know, the separate sense of self. And that's enough. And then eventually that's not enough. We want to dissolve the disturbance, even though we're not identifying with it. It's still going on in the outskirts of our being, isn't it? And in the suburbs. And I'm just like, okay, can we just dissolve? It's like the ego is this separate being, is this energetic mass of buttons just waiting to be pushed. Okay, like what's life like without that then? And then there's an urgency to find out eventually, isn't there? Which sounds like you're describing. I have to transform this somehow. I have to, you know, see what it's like without it completely.
Yeah, I don't want to. It just can't be true. So I'm doing some more looking, and how can anyone know that? How could you know? How could I don't know. And images, you know, you get images, and how do I know they got to do with this body? That they were accepted for so long, and a story was around it. But like I said, at this moment, it's like no, no, go away.
I remember I got to a point where I was, okay, what's the bottom line here with stories? And it became increasingly clear that anything that I thought had happened since this body arrived was an absolute work of fiction. You know, and if it wasn't true without my body present, it wasn't true, basically, including this I'm waking up to the self story that was, you know, the greatest fiction of it all. And all that remains after the body's gone is what was here before, and it's still here, and that's the only thing that's ultimately permanent. And so I kind of had this mantra for a while: is this true if I didn't have a body? You know, I need to let go of this thing, or I need to stop doing this, or become that, or move towards that, or transform this. It just wiped it all clean. It was like, oh, this is actually a little bit easier than I thought, you know. And it's because it's the old, you know, die before you die. But what does that actually mean? Well, it means if it's only possible for you to have this problem while you have a human body, then it's not really your problem ultimately. Which is a bit more final than a lot of people like. But when you're ready for that, you're ready for that. You know, it's.
Yeah, I'm definitely ready for that. That final. It's not true. It can't be true. Yeah, so it's like you were saying, to allow that love, you know, and it feels like this authenticity isn't, I don't want to say it's not complete, because I am that, but it's where can this love expand to without anything trying to stick to it, and I'd really want to experience that now without anything that can stick at all.
For me, it was just like I got to this point where love just wasn't willing to limit itself anymore through stories. It just didn't want to do that anymore, you know. Like, I'm done with that now. What's it like without the stories, without the limitations?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it, actually. It's what is it like with it really unlimited? And yeah, that sounds really exciting.
And it's never ending as well. You can always discover more about that, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We really are so lucky as human beings. We don't feel that way until we get to kind of this point in our awakening. We feel like, you know, this horrible long struggle. But when you get to that point, what this really is about is an ever increasing ability to let go of limitations on our ability to love, and then eventually to love without an object, to not be the subject, and to love something else, there's just love in the end, without any stories.
Yeah, because I can see that when I'm only feeling like it's all just myself, looking at myself, you know, from the self for the self, really. I love that statement, and it just reminds me that yeah, I can't project, I can't blame, I can't do anything, and that's what that energy feels like. It's like, yeah, it wants to, but it's just like, no, it can't. There's and to really not own it as in it's I want to own a problem or make it a problem, but to yeah, really see that this is something that has to be seen through, or appear to be seen through, and right here, right now, and then that peace and love just reveals itself in that moment, and that's really beautiful. And so that's evidence itself that it was never really real. It's never you know, going to be agreed to anymore. But yeah, anyway, there's someone else waiting.
In the end, they're just all these stories are just defense mechanisms against this love, aren't they? You know, they're just ways that we hold back this immensity of our being, you know. And in the end, you just don't want to do that anymore. And I'm really happy that that's happening. Really happy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Go to Caroline.
Oh, namaste, Helen.
Namaste.
I just wanted to thank you for your words, because I feel that you've really spoken to the core of my being, and I felt incredibly sad to see how what we've been doing to ourselves, really, how we made it so difficult, and how the whole world is making it so difficult for themselves. And sorry, I'm a bit like I'm crying, but now I can laugh about it also.
Okay, it's absolutely okay. I've totally been there.
But I really feel that, you know, after all the videos that I've seen of you and all the satsangs that I've done with you, I really feel that these words are just it. And yeah, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that, and to really wake something up in me that really needed to say, okay, I can do this. I can open myself up for this love. And I think that's what everyone wants. This is what everybody is looking for. Most of them in the wrong directions, but I think if we can start with this for ourselves, that yeah, we can probably make a better world.
Every time a human heart, you know, is willing to accept that it may already be this, you know, that just transforms everything for that human being, but also for everything around them. You know, so saying yes to this is it's the best thing that any of us can do for the world, for our family, for our nearest and dearest, but also for every human being as well. You know, can we imagine what it'd be like if there was 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 of us, you know, or 1,000,000, you know, I could keep going, that we're saying yes to this, and then suddenly everyone didn't believe it was so hard anymore, or they couldn't believe they weren't worthy of it anymore, you know, and it's something beautiful begins to happen there, doesn't it? And it cascades out from any time that any heart is opened up to it, it cascades out in other bodies around it. It just can't help but do that. And it's just a beautiful thing when we're finally ready to drop our reasons why it's not gonna happen for me, you know, that is beautiful, or I'm not ready for it, not worthy of it, whatever we're telling ourselves, you know. Right where I am with my judgmental thoughts and my unworthiness and my anger and my self-blame and doubt, I'm already worthy because I exist. And that's a lovely thing. And I totally I was kind of like that for 5 hours after that moment, just crying and laughing, and I must have gone through 2 boxes of tissues at that point, you know. Didn't sleep much that night because I was just high as a kite, you know, and it never left me. It settled down in its intensity, and it was more, I could function better with it, you know. Bearable isn't the right word because it sounds like something horrible, but you get used to it in a way that you can function with it, but it never leaves you once you experience it the first time, you know. It never leaves you completely. Wonderful. Absolutely lovely. Oh,
thank you
for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Pat.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. I feel absolutely drawn to, not compelled, but just drawn to respond, because it just, the nature of your sharing, and it felt like sharing, was so full of positivity, braveness, and kind of accuracy. I don't know what the words are, but you know, it really, something was working. And even if you'd been singing the national anthem backwards or something, I may have felt the same thing, I don't know, but certainly something was happening. And over the experience of listening, or trying to listen, there was a realization of many moments of love, and from being a very small child, being loved, or loving, or finding without any words or side to it, or very emotional somehow, but very going outwards to people as a child. And throughout an existence, very, very mixed by my own doing and other people's kind of thing, like most of us. Very, very mixed, but overall, some undeniable experiences or moments of love in action, whether it seems to be me or someone else. And it was noticeable when you started to speak that recently, without any particular direction or words, a feeling of being closer to something more real in me towards other people. Either it may be a kind of hearing my negativity, or didn't really matter so much which way round, but having something a bit more true going on. I'm doing a motion downwards as if it's a very low down, not low in quality, but just not very complicated.
Quite grounded and simple, but authentic, isn't it? And
something like that.
yeah.
And a sort of almost close behind a feeling of a rightness about that, and a wanting to go in that direction. And so somehow this that you've brought and shared, it just really, if I was a plant, I'd be saturated and I'd have water up to my eyeballs.
That's literally how I felt sitting in that room. I just felt like it filled up to here and it just started spilling out the sides. You know, that's the best words I can describe it with.
Ah.
Saturated, absolutely saturated. Yeah.
So, and I just, I'm, you know, as I said, very drawn to say that none of us should really doubt, I suppose, the impulse to go outwards to, if that's the right expression, but go towards other people with some sort of love or positiveness, whatever words we use, because it can't be wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, something like that.
We've all had plenty of examples in our life where we feel we need those barriers and where we feel it's not safe to try to be more loving or open to other beings. And it takes a little bit of courage at first, doesn't it, to do that?
And about 120 years or however old I am.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is the experience and some kind of trust. And it, as various people have been saying, it's ever opening. Everything just somehow, it seems ever revealing or expanding. Again, the words aren't quite right, but it's never, all right, got that, seen that, you know, or I gradually realized that. So the feeling is one to finally speak, just sitting here for 6 months or however long. Mostly because we'll never shut up. You'll have to turn me off. Also because I really appreciate it very much and want to say thank you. But there's so much for everybody just listening to people today and before. We're just given this opportunity somehow to be living this like this.
Right now, right here, right as you are.
And it's just, well, that. So I don't know who I'm thanking, but the whole
Doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter in that way.
And I think I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, you know, we'll get back to 1949 or something.
I deeply appreciate you sharing, and I really like what you touched upon as you know, the honesty and the authenticity in your words and that openness. You can feel it, and the this urge you were saying to want to, at some point, that love, that wholeness is going to want to re-embrace everyone in your life. And for me, it was kind of, I held that back for a long time, and then eventually it just couldn't be held back any longer. It just wanted to love. You know, what's it like to be a sister or a wife or a mother or whatever we're being, from that essence of love? What's it like to just love this person completely? And it's the most extraordinary way a human being can live. And it does take a little courage at first, doesn't it? But it's when you don't need anything back from that being, it really doesn't matter if they're not open to that love at that point and they reject it somehow. It's enough that you are being that somehow, isn't it? And it's
absolutely. Thank you.
And then most times you don't get rejected because you're coming from this openness. But You can also understand then as well why other people have these protections in place on their heart. You know, they don't feel able to yet let go, and it's totally okay. But if you are, you are, and well done to you for that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, Pat. Lovely.
Bye.
Okay, Megan.
Namaste. Hi, Helen.
Namaste. How are you doing?
All right. I'll probably reiterate what Pat said and Carrie. I feel to respond and to express, and I absolutely know I'm going to make a hodgepodge of it because the mind's like pretty.
You and me both. You and me both. I always finish that saying. I go, I just didn't say it the way I want to say it, but it's all good. It's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, and just to thank Rich for the courage to share as well. No idea what he's going through, but I lost my bestie a couple of months ago, so I know the kind of the very real state of grief that and the richness that can bring to yeah. I'm just going to go into the mind because that's where or the headspace, because I do that in defense, but it was interesting, and I've really appreciated your responding to my emails in the dissolving the ego, and one thing that really struck me was I talked about joy and you said that and simplicity, and yeah, you could relate to the complex, like my mind loves complexity, and that I may find that I, fall in love with simplicity as well. Like there's that space. So that kind of that struck me, and I've been falling in love with the joy a bit, and feeling drawn to tune into the noumenal. It's like I did that one evening as well as the morning, and then the next night I didn't, and I went, oh, I missed that. Even though I'd only done it once, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll do that in the afternoon as well. And it's like this just this drawing to that place that's always there, but it's just taking the attention.
It was like that for me. It was, okay, can I meditate twice a day? Can I sneak another 5 minutes in? Can I? And then eventually, I don't want to feel. I want to feel like that all the time. I want to feel that, like, I want to be that all the time. That's the falling in love, isn't it? With that simple, powerfully simple place that just it just calls you and draws you.
Yeah, and so what I found interesting with you raising this the love tonight was, because I have a group of friends and the conversation is kind of around people waking up, especially at this time, and I've been feeling more and more like I'm in a dream, and kind of realizing, oh well, that's actually because I am, so that's all right. So rather than thinking I'm a bit nuts, it's like, oh, actually that's what's going on, so that's okay. But this conversation around people need to wake up or something like that is a bit of a folly, because like you say, you can't stop people waking up. When that happens, that happens. But I've been kind of what's come to me is to kind of illustrate that to people with, well, you know, have you been able to stop yourself falling in love? You know, it's pretty, once that starts to happen, it's kind of happens.
Stop it, yeah, nothing at all will stop it. Yeah.
So it's, and when you fall in love, like all of the insecurities come up, you know. So it's a bit,
yeah.
it's not, in some aspect, it's not at all the same, but in some aspect, it's really the same. It's like that same kind of thing, you know, it's the falling in love, just happening.
I used to know this person that I think for the first time I ever truly experienced unconditional love from this being. He didn't need me to change at all. And I just couldn't accept that from where I was at the time. I kept pushing them away. And it really struck me, which is what I was trying to get across in the first bit of the satsang. It was like that again. Some part of my being just loves myself, my small self, unconditionally already. Doesn't need anything from it. Doesn't even need it to wake up. You know, and like you were saying, then it's just can I really accept that it doesn't matter. I could work on my egoic sense of self forever. It wouldn't make a slight bit of difference to my lovability, you know, from the real being. It just already is so. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just put a small thing in because there's a, you know, there's depth and depth and depth to what, you know, with what you spoke of tonight that I know has not touched me. Like, I just know, right? I just know that, you know, and that's okay. That's more to come. But, you know, I'm just, it felt important to express what was here tonight, for, you know, for me, really. So thank you. Yeah.
The kind of danger of talking this way is some people will hear it and say, oh, that's never going to happen to me, you know, and I wish that would happen to me, but it's never going to. And then others will hear it and go, I have to experience that. I have to right now experience that. And then usually it's some mixture of those, isn't it, that arises inside, some sense of, well, it's just never going to happen for me. And then also a sense of, but I really, really, really have to find out what that is, you know. So it's just to notice if that sense comes up, and it's important to share when it does touch your heart like that. There's an openness in sharing, isn't there? Like this, a lack of feeling defended, needing to defend myself. Yeah.
And there is some compelling, like I've been playing with, or if I interact with the people that I live with my family here, in a space of love, you know, like the state that I'm in could be, I could go through a whole range of states and they may or may not feel, I don't know, but, you know, but just the space for that to, you know, like that's a possibility, you know, that I could be in quite a different space interacting with them.
All it takes is that openness.
Yeah.
That openness is all it takes, and that can happen in any moment. You know, that openness, and that's the whole purpose of these words, is to somehow foster that openness. You know, what if that is all it takes, instead of all my other excuses about, you know. So lovely. I really appreciate you sharing that, and very heartfelt words. Thank you.
Thank you.
You take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least is Steve.
Hi, Helen.
Hiya, how you doing?
Got a frog in my throat at the moment. I'm not so bad, love, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm very good, thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right. But I just want to let you just said that. Glad you just said that to Megan. So I thought it's back where I hadn't had that experience she's talking about, you know. But I caught it, you know. I'm still asking the question, is it true that I'm already where I'm trying to get, you know? And I think in that room, I knocked at the door, and when it opened, I was inside.
Yeah.
Stuff like, you know, so I mean, right, and it's definitely working.
Good.
I also go back to that, am I safe at times? You know, so I'd say I've had a rocky road, you know what I mean? And I'd say now it's bumpy, but it's not rocky. You know, so it's a definitely improvement.
Some speed bumps maybe along the way.
Yeah, there's some bumps there, yeah. It's not perfect peace, but I can find the peace a lot easier, a lot more sustained. It's definitely improving. But I've noticed a lot of talk about the authenticity, you know what I mean, of your teaching. And I knew from the moment I met you, it was something very, I call it down to earth, authentic. That's basically, you were just all right. You were okay, and you could talk about this stuff. And I did grill you a bit, didn't I? Only because I
did. You put me through a job interview, which is a good thing to do. If you're going to put your trust in someone to kind of guide your, you know, help open your spiritual, you know, it's a good idea, isn't it? And, you know, I think after we'd finished, I was like, phew, I think I passed the interview, but we'll see.
Yeah, I still had doubts after that, but it's consistency as well. You see, I've known you now maybe 18 months-ish, and you're consistently the same approach. You just don't change your teaching per se. I mean, it's a different way of putting it, but it's the same thing over and over and over again. And there's never I ain't heard a negative thing come out of you. It's, if anyone's thinking is she author, yes, she is, yeah. She definitely, without a doubt. Because I used to, when you're on about your things today about putting them pictures of Ramana and Jesus and stuff around it, I've thought about doing all this stuff. I haven't quite got around to doing it yet.
I was so desperate at that point, Steve. I thought, you know, if I just put all these great beings on these pictures around my bedroom, I put them around my bed. So I was thinking, if I sleep on this bed that's surrounded by all these great beings, even their pictures, it might soak in somehow and sort of burst through the defenses, you know, like by osmosis or something. And maybe it did, who knows?
Maybe it did, yeah. We don't
when
know,
you're desperate enough to
yeah, you try anything.
You'll do anything.
Yeah. Well, I've got Ramana on my phone, and I think there's a Gadata skate to death, wasn't it, in the middle of the night? But although I love his teaching. But Jesus, at first, because I felt like the church had really duped me. It got me. I've got lovely feelings when I first went in. Before I went into church, I got this beautiful experience of what I thought of Christ and this, that, and the other, you know what I mean? But when they'd finished with me, or when I finished with them, I had no faith left. The teaching was somehow not authentic. Certainly not authentic. That's what it is. I always know, Chrissy, I don't mean that to be upsetting anybody, but I came out and I was upset, and it really felt duped and betrayed type of thing, and this and the other. And when we used to talk about it on Satsang, not necessarily you, but I've heard other people on YouTube and this, that, and the other mention Jesus, and I used to cringe, you know, like that. And today I don't now, you know what I mean? I just see him. I see him not just is one of the teachers. He's one of the, like the Buddha, like this, like they're all trying to send the same message. Yeah. But somehow someone's picked up this or that from it and they made a religion out of this, that, and the other, and they've missed this is how I see it. They've missed the proper teaching. But they were trying, and they've all been trying to tell it the same thing, but they've picked up on. Luckily, the like power and behave yourselves and
the power and the clarity of that original awakened being that the religion is founded upon still transcends all the, you know, if your heart's open to receive it, you can transcend all the cultural and religious stuff that's added to it, you know, and it's kind of filtered and watered down, but the original purity is still there in the essence, even if not in the words or the actions of I think one of the hardest things for any human being to do is to open their heart again to a spiritual teaching after they feel that they've done that once and they feel they've been led down the wrong path or betrayed, as you said, either accidentally or on purpose. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to open your heart back up again then to, you know, just in case you were to experience that again. But It's what we're all called to do, isn't it? In the end, to be able to do that is something amazing.
Yeah, I see it now as I'm going back now 30 years. When I first asked Christ, like whatever it happened, something happened there, because it lasted for a few months. You know what I mean? Now, there are all sorts going on, but the time the teaching wasn't there to follow it up. I think somehow I don't know what it was, but
There has to be, in any authentic teaching, I think there has to be a mix of wisdom and love. You know, that those two are best mixed together. You know, too much wisdom and it gets kind of dry, doesn't it? And too much devotion, then we might end up devoted to the wrong thing or the thing that's not healthy for us. So some healthy mix of those two, love and devotion and wisdom, and then throw in a little bit of a way to serve or help other beings, and you've got a perfect recipe there to come out of it, you know, to really wake up. Yeah, lovely. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we will leave it there for today. Thank you for everyone that shared today. It was really appreciated, and it's good to hear the feedback, and so I'm not left with this sense of disappointment that I wasn't able to get my message across, and maybe I got it across whichever degree was needed. And how can we ever describe something like that anyway, completely in words? Okay, thank you. Namaste.